The club was alive. Lights, laughter, illusion. But behind its shimmer, something darker pulsed beneath the beat. The bass line vibrated through the floorboards, rattling glass, pulsing like a second heartbeat in the dark. Sapphire lights cut through the haze, chasing smoke and sweat as bodies moved in rhythm. The crowd was hypnotized by the spectacle, by the shimmer of sequins, the practiced smiles, the promise of freedom. But behind the curtains, freedom had a price. Mara adjusted her costume under the glare of the cracked backstage mirror. Glitter dusted her collarbone, her lipstick perfect, her smile rehearsed. She touched the tiny silver locket at her throat, a habit before every show. Inside was a faded picture of her younger sister, one she hadn't seen in 3 years. The necklace was her reminder. She danced for survival, not for applause. The music out front swelled, and she heard the crowd chanting. She breathed once, then walked into the light. To the audience, she was energy, grace, and motion. To herself, she was a survivor in sequence. 7 years in this industry had taught her that every stage was a stage for someone else's power. She had worked at Velvet Room, Halo, and Obsidian, each one owned by the same man whose name floated like smoke through every conversation, Victor Dane. People said his name softly, like superstition. Whenever it was spoken, laughter dimmed, conversations broke off. Victor was a businessman, a public philanthropist, and the owner of nearly every major club in the city. To outsiders, he was a visionary who revitalized nightlife. To those who worked under him, he was a shadow everyone tried not to notice. New dancers joined every month, bright, eager, chasing a dream of art and independence. They didn't see the warning signs at first. Then the changes came. Envelopes exchanged in private rooms, sudden schedule cuts for those who refused certain offers, and whispers of private meetings behind closed doors. It was a quiet system of control, and everyone played along to survive. Mara had learned to read the signs, to stay invisible, to keep her head down, until the night Victor called her upstairs. His office was glass and silence, the kind of room that looked expensive enough to make you small. He greeted her with that perfect, press-ready smile. "Mara," he said, gesturing for her to sit, "you've been doing incredible work. I'm thinking of promoting you, maybe even as a choreographer for the new venue we're opening." It sounded like an opportunity, but his eyes told another story. There was no promotion without a price. She thanked him, smiled faintly, said she was honored but too tired to take on more work right now. The air shifted. His smile faltered, just enough to show what lived beneath it. "Be careful," he said softly. "Ambition fades if you don't feed it." That night, her name disappeared from 2 of her prime performance slots. The message was clear. Mara sat alone in the dressing room, removing her makeup under flickering lights. She thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet, all the stories that never left these walls. She realized silence wasn't protection, it was permission. In the entertainment world, that silence was systemic. Power, when unchecked, becomes exploitation. Dancers like Mara were celebrated for the art they brought to the stage, yet denied basic worker protections behind it. That imbalance wasn't accidental, it was designed. Sociologists call it structural vulnerability. When your job depends on staying likable, abuse hides behind politeness. Mara couldn't define it in academic terms, but she felt it in her bones. Every withheld payment, every unspoken threat, every favor disguised as opportunity, it all built a cage. And though she hadn't found the courage to fight it yet, she was starting to see the bars clearly for the first time. Weeks later, a new dancer arrived. Her name was Elena, young, bold, eyes bright with dreams. She reminded Mara of who she used to be. One night, after closing, Mara found her crying in the dressing room, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "He told me I could make triple," Elena whispered. "He said it was for a private event. I thought it was a real gig. It wasn't." Mara's hands clenched around the edge of the vanity. She'd heard stories like this before, but seeing Elena, the disbelief, the humiliation hit something deep. For a moment, Mara wanted to walk away, to pretend it wasn't her problem. But the echo of Elena's quiet sob followed her like a ghost. She stopped in the hallway, frozen. Her reflection in the darkened mirror met her gaze, tired, angry, awake. She whispered to herself, "If he can use his power in silence, maybe we can use our voices in the same way together." That thought scared her. but it also breathed life into something she hadn't felt in years: defiance. Exploitation thrives on three things: fear, isolation, and normalization. Fear silences its victims. Isolation keeps them from organizing. Normalization convinces them this is just how things are. But the moment someone names it, the structure begins to crack. Mara didn't know how to change the system yet, but she knew naming it was the first step. The following weekend, the lights at Eclipse burned brighter than ever. The crowd was wild, the energy electric. From the stage, it looked like freedom. From behind the curtain, it felt like war. As Mara stepped into the light, she didn't just dance, she fought. Every spin, every gesture, every breath became a quiet act of rebellion. Her body told the truth, but her voice wasn't ready to speak. And as she caught her reflection in the stage mirror, something flickered there. Not fear, not exhaustion, but resolve. The crowd cheered, oblivious to what had begun behind the sparkle. In that moment, Mara made a silent promise. She would no longer dance for survival. She would dance for change. As the music hit its final beat, she spun beneath the lights, every movement a secret act of defiance. Behind her reflection in the mirror, the revolution had already begun. The next few weeks passed in fragments of music and smoke. The same songs, the same smiles, the same routines that had once felt automatic now felt like ghosts of a life Mara was ready to leave behind. Every night, the applause came. Every night, she wondered if anyone clapping could sense the quiet storm growing behind the curtains. It began subtly, a whisper here, a glance there. Between costume changes, in corners where cameras didn't reach, the dancers started talking. Not loudly, not yet. Just questions murmured into mirrors. Did he ever? Has he said that to you? Did your pay change after you said no? Each time the answers came as a sigh or a nod, a pattern forming, invisible but undeniable. Mara didn't recruit them, not exactly. She only listened, and that was enough. Dancers who'd worked in silence for years suddenly found a listener and someone who didn't dismiss their unease. It started with three: Mara, Elena, and Tasha, a veteran dancer with a sharp tongue and a scar she never explained. Within a week, there were 6. Within 2, 12. They met after hours in the back storage room of Eclipse, sitting on crates of unopened champagne. The hum of the refrigerators became their background music. It wasn't a formal meeting, just a circle of exhausted women trying to name what had been done to them. "We can't just quit," Tasha said one night, her voice low but steady. "He owns half the clubs in the city. He's got people everywhere." Elena leaned forward. "What if we go public? Tell someone." "Tell who?" another dancer muttered. "The police? They'll laugh." "Reporters? He buys ad space in every major magazine." Mara stayed quiet for a moment. Her mind was turning, not with rage, but with UT's strategy. "What if," she said softly, "we show people what he's really doing? Not just tell them, show them." That sentence lingered in the air like a match before the flame. They started keeping records, notes hidden in phone memos, screenshots of messages, and recorded calls. They were careful, meticulous, and afraid. But the fear now had a direction. Each night, they shared what they gathered, piecing together the shape of Victor's network. His auditions happened at multiple clubs, under different names. He offered contracts that required dancers to sign away earnings for promotion fees. And when someone refused, they were blacklisted. For the first time, they had evidence, not enough to destroy him, but enough to make the silence breakable. Still, fear shadowed every move. One night, after rehearsal, Mara found her locker open. Her phone was gone. She froze. The other dancers exchanged worried looks. "You think it's him?" Elena whispered. Mara didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next day, Victor showed up unannounced. The entire staff straightened like soldiers. His smile was broad, his tone casual, but his eyes searched. "How's everyone feeling?" he asked, voice warm but hollow. "Good energy tonight?" No one spoke. The silence was heavy enough to crush sound. Then his gaze landed on Mara. "You're quieter lately," he said. "Everything all right?" Her heart thudded, but her voice stayed calm. "Just focused," she replied. "You said ambition fades if you don't feed it." For a moment he studied her, then smiled, a slow, practiced curl of the mouth. "Good," he said. "Keep feeding it." And then he left. The tension stayed long after he was gone. The others looked to Mara, but she said nothing. She only thought, he suspects something. We have to move faster. In the days that followed, the group grew bolder. Tasha's friend from another club confirmed that similar things were happening there. Same contracts, same manipulation, same whispered threats. The pattern was spreading across the city. The dancers realized they weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were uncovering a system. That's when education became their weapon. Mara reached out to a woman named Dr. Renee Alvarez, a sociologist who had once spoken at a local workshop about gendered labor and exploitation in entertainment spaces. Mara remembered her words. Exploitation thrives where labor is invisible. She sent a message under a fake name explaining vaguely what was happening. Dr. Alvarez responded within hours. If what you're describing is true, document everything and be careful. Power doesn't surrender quietly. Those words became their mantra. Be careful, power doesn't surrender quietly. Over the next month, the dancers' secret network grew across clubs. They shared encrypted group chats, coded their notes as choreography sequences, and met in laundromats and late-night diners. Fear never left them, but unity gave it shape. In one of those late-night meetings, Elena asked, "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? If he's too big to fight?" Mara looked at her and said, "He's already afraid. That's why he's watching us. If he weren't scared, he wouldn't care." That line lit something in the group. The fear became fuel. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, the club packed, lights blinding. During her final set, Mara caught a glimpse of a man standing near the back, not one of the usual security staff. He was filming. Not her performance, but the dancers backstage. Something was wrong. After the show, they followed him quietly out the side door. He got into a black car, one of Victor's. The next morning, Elena found that her locker had been emptied too. They knew the clock was ticking. Mara spent that day sitting in her apartment, blinds drawn, laptop open, scrolling through the folder of evidence they had built. Photos, text logs, financial records, statements. She could feel the story inside the data. A story that could burn everything down if told right. She sent a message to Dr. Alvarez again. If someone had proof of systematic exploitation in clubs, what would happen if it went public? The reply came minutes later. If you go public, make sure you do it together. One voice gets silenced. Many become undeniable. That night, Mara gathered the group one last time. "We're done hiding," she said. "He thinks we're scared. Let's prove him right until we aren't." They agreed to leak their evidence anonymously through a journalist who specialized in labor exploitation stories. The plan was dangerous, but it was the only way to stay visible and safe at the same time. The following week, while the city danced under neon lights, the first article dropped. Whispers in the dark. Dancers speak of exploitation under nightlife empire. The world blinked. For the first time, their silence had sound. Mara stood in front of the mirror that night, the article glowing on her phone screen. She saw her reflection, tired, yes, but lighter somehow. She touched the locket at her throat and whispered, "We're not done yet." Behind her, in every club Victor owned, dancers read the same headline, and for the first time, they didn't feel alone. And somewhere, in an office high above the city, Victor Dane stared at his own reflection in the darkened glass, the first hint of fear crossing his face. The revolution had left the dressing room. The article hit the city like a tremor no one was prepared for. By morning, it was everywhere. Screenshots on social media, whispered in cafes, flashing briefly on local news before being taken down. The story was aimed at no one directly, but every dancer in the industry knew exactly who it was about, and so did Victor. Mara had barely slept. She sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, the glow of her phone screen lighting her tired eyes. The notifications poured in, anonymous messages from dancers she'd never met, thanking her, sharing their stories. Others were afraid, warning her that Victor's people were asking questions. By afternoon, the atmosphere at Eclipse had changed. The laughter felt forced. The smiles stretched too thin. Security was doubled. Everyone sensed it, the calm before something dangerous. When Victor walked in that night, even the lights seemed to dim. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His silence carried a kind of menace words couldn't touch. He stood by the bar, scanning the room. His expression was unreadable, his composure terrifying. "Some of you," he said finally, voice smooth as glass, "may have seen certain rumors circulating. falsehoods meant to destroy good people. I built this world for you, and this is how loyalty is repaid. No one moved. Then his tone sharpened. I'll find out who did this. He left the club soon after, but the air didn't breathe again for hours. Backstage, Elena was trembling. He knows, she whispered. He knows it's us. Mara looked at her, steady but pale. Then we don't hide anymore. The next day, the journalist published a follow-up piece. It was bolder, more detailed, backed by the evidence the dancers had risked everything to gather. Contracts, text messages, audio recordings, all redacted but unmistakable. The headline read, "Inside the Empire, Exploitation, Fear, and the Women Who Fought Back." That was when things truly changed. The phones at every club under Victor's name started ringing off the hook. Reporters, investigators, sponsors, lawyers. Some clubs quietly closed for renovations. Others changed ownership overnight. But victory didn't come without consequence. One of the dancers, Tasha, was followed home. A car idled outside her apartment for hours. Elena got a call from a blocked number, a man's voice saying, "You should have stayed quiet." The group grew paranoid, careful with their movements, watching shadows that might not even be there. Mara went into hiding for a few days. She stayed at a friend's apartment, curtains drawn, her phone on airplane mode. For the first time, she questioned whether she'd gone too far. The city was buzzing, but her body was trembling. Then Dr. Alvarez called. Mara answered, voice shaking. "I read the articles," the professor said. "You've done something historic, but now you need protection. The system won't thank you for exposing it." "I'm scared," Mara admitted. "They're watching us." "That fear," Alvarez said softly, "is proof that you've broken something powerful. Fear isn't weakness, it's evidence that you matter. Don't let it control the story now." Those words steadied her. Days later, a major TV network aired a segment about the expose. They blurred faces, distorted voices, but the message was clear. A network of women had come together to expose an empire of abuse. The anchor's voice was calm but heavy. For years, these performers worked in silence, afraid to lose their livelihoods. Now, their collective courage has forced a reckoning. The reckoning came swiftly. City inspectors launched investigations. Labor rights groups reached out. Former employees from other industries, bartenders, waitresses, and stage technicians started coming forward with their own stories. The dancers' courage was contagious. But Victor wasn't done. He filed lawsuits against the journalist and several clubs, claiming defamation. His lawyers went on TV, calling the expose a fabrication fueled by disgruntled employees. Some media outlets bought the narrative, painting the dancers as attention seekers. Others defended them. The city says split in half, believers and deniers. Mara watched from her small apartment, her hands clenched around a mug of coffee gone cold. Every headline felt like a heartbeat. One moment hope, the next fear. Elena came over one night, exhausted and teary. "He's going to win, isn't he? He always wins." Mara looked at her with quiet conviction. "Not this time. He can fight us in public, but the truth is already out there. You can't unhear it once it's spoken." A week later, the journalist released the third piece, the most explosive yet. It contained testimonies from over 20 women across 4 cities. One quote echoed through every media outlet. "They thought we were entertainment. We turned out to be evidence." That line became a slogan overnight. It appeared on posters, online banners, and protest signs. Demonstrations began outside Victor's headquarters, not just dancers, but students, activists, and ordinary citizens demanding reform. What started as whispers had become a movement. Victor responded the only way men like him do, with denial, intimidation, and money. But for every threat he issued, another woman spoke up. Still, the pressure took its toll. Some dancers withdrew from the group, too afraid to keep fighting. Others lost their jobs. Elena received a cease and desist letter. Tasha's landlord suddenly ended her lease. Mara felt the weight of every consequence. Some nights, she lay awake listening to the city hum outside her window, wondering if courage was worth the cost. Then she'd remember Elena's tears, Tasha's scars, her own reflection under the club lights, and she'd know the answer. The turning point came when one of Victor's former managers reached out to the journalist, offering documents that confirmed everything: payroll discrepancies, unreported earnings, blacklisted names. It was the missing link. The journalist called Mara the night before publishing. "Once this goes out," she said, "there's no going back. He'll fall, but he'll take people with him." Mara hesitated. "Then let him. We've lived under his shadow long enough." The next morning, the front page exploded with the headline that would change everything: "The Dane Files, Inside a Network of Exploitation." Within hours, Victor's empire began to collapse. Investors pulled out, clubs shut down, his legal team resigned, cameras swarmed his mansion gates. For the first time, he had nowhere to hide. That night, as rain fell over the city, Mara stood outside Eclipse. The neon sign flickered weakly, the door chained shut. She placed her hand against the glass and whispered, "It's over." Behind her, a group of dancers stood in silence. They weren't smiling, not yet. They were exhausted, uncertain, but free. Mara turned to them and said quietly, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something honest." Elena smiled faintly. "Then let's make it count." For the first time in years, the city's lights felt real. Not like illusions, but like truth, finally breaking through the dark. And as the night stretched over the skyline, Mara realized something profound. Revolutions don't always roar. Sometimes they dance. Morning came without silence. The city was still trembling from the impact of the final article. Every news outlet had picked it up now. Every radio show, every podcast, every common thread buzzed with it: the Dane Files. Victor Dane had vanished. Some said he fled to Europe, others that he was hiding in one of his private estates. No one knew for sure. But his empire was collapsing in real time. Bank accounts frozen, properties seized, investigations multiplying. For the first time, the system that had protected him was turning inward, devouring itself. Mara woke to the sound of her phone vibrating nonstop, calls from journalists, lawyers, strangers. She ignored them all. She walked to the window, coffee in hand, and stared down at the street below. There was a protest happening again, this time organized by a coalition of workers' rights groups. A handmade banner caught her eye: "We are not invisible." She felt something swell inside her chest. Not pride, not relief, something quieter: completion. Later that day, she met with Dr. Alvarez in a small cafe, far from the downtown chaos. The professor's hair was tied back, her eyes bright with exhaustion and something like hope. "You've done what most academics only write about," Alvarez said. "You forced accountability into a space that thrives on silence." Mara stirred her drink absently. "I didn't do it alone." "No one ever does," Alvarez replied. "Movements are born from collectives. The system only changes when those inside it refuse to participate anymore." Mara nodded slowly. "But what happens now? The clubs are closing. The dancers are scattered. Some of them can't pay rent. We burned down the cage, but now there's nowhere to stand." "That's the next step," Alvarez said. "Reconstruction." Over the next few weeks, reconstruction became the word on everyone's lips. Activists began forming a union, not just for dancers, but for all nightlife performers. Lawyers volunteered their time to draft labor standards for freelance artists. Workshops sprang up to teach dancers about contracts, consent, and workplace rights. Mara threw herself into the work. She spent her nights making calls, her days in meetings. For the first time, she wasn't performing, she was building. But healing wasn't easy. The adrenaline that had carried them through the chaos began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and doubt. Elena struggled the most. One night, Mara found her sitting on the fire escape, staring at the city lights. "I thought I'd feel free after all this," Elena said quietly. "But I just feel empty. Like I don't know who I am without the fight." Mara sat beside her. "You're still you," she said gently. "We fought because we had to. Now we get to live because we chose to." Elena nodded, tears catching the glow of streetlights. "You think people will forget?" "They'll try," Mara said, "but history doesn't fade that easily, especially when it's written by those who lived it." Within a month, the first official inquiry report was released. It confirmed everything. Years of financial fraud, coercion, and systemic abuse under Victor Dane's network. The report ended with a recommendation: a new regulatory board for performance venues and legal protections for independent dancers. The City Council passed the Performers' Rights Act 3 months later. It was imperfect, filled with compromises, but it was something. For the first time, dancers had a legal framework to stand under. The press called it the Mara Law, though Mara herself refused to take credit. "It wasn't my name that built this," she told reporters. "It was our unity." Still, the world wanted a face, and hers became the symbol. Documentaries, talk shows, and interviews, people wanted to hear her story. She gave them parts of it, but never the whole thing. Some truths, she believed, belonged to the collective, not the individual. Meanwhile, Victor's trial began overseas. Images of him in a dark suit, walking past cameras with hollow eyes, flooded the media. The man who had once owned entire nights now looked like a ghost trying to blend into daylight. Mara watched one of the broadcasts in silence. Elena turned to her and asked, "Do you feel sorry for him?" Mara shook her head. "No, but I pity what power did to him. He built his empire on control because he was terrified of being ordinary." Elena exhaled slowly. "You think people like him ever learn?" "Maybe," Mara said, "but learning doesn't erase damage. It just stops the cycle." Time moved differently after that. The clubs reopened under new management with new codes of conduct. The culture began to shift. Auditions included contract briefings. Security protocols were standardized. Whisper networks became open support forums. Mara returned to teaching dance workshops. But this time, she didn't just teach technique, she taught agency. She taught young performers how to own their space, how to set boundaries, how to see themselves as artists, not commodities. During one session, a young dancer asked, "Why did you stay so long before speaking out?" Mara smiled faintly. "Because I believed silence was safety, but safety without dignity isn't safety at all." The room fell silent. The students listened, not as fans, but as inheritors of something larger. A legacy born from pain, but shaped by courage. That evening, she visited the old Eclipse building. It was empty now, being converted into a cultural arts center. She walked through the bare halls where lights once pulsed and music shook the walls. The air was quiet, but she could still feel the echoes. She stood where the stage used to be and imagined all the dancers who had stood there before her, performing, pretending, surviving. She whispered into the darkness, "You're free now." Her phone buzzed, a message from the union group chat. Elena had just posted a photo from their new community studio, captioned, "From victims to visionaries." Mara smiled. That night, the city was calm. The skyline glowed like an ember instead of a fire. She watched it from her window, realizing that revolutions don't end when justice arrives. They end when healing begins. And healing, she finally understood, was the quietest kind of victory. Years passed, the city changed. New clubs rose from the ashes of the old empire. Each one built differently. Open contracts, transparent wages, cameras in offices, zero-tolerance policies. The industry that once thrived on silence now thrives on accountability. And though exploitation hadn't vanished completely, it could no longer hide in plain sight. For Mara, the transformation was both surreal and grounding. She'd become an unintentional symbol, her name attached to causes and laws she hadn't asked to own. She had never wanted fame, only fairness. But time had a way of rewriting stories, and hers had become one people turned to when they needed courage. She lived quietly now, in a small apartment overlooking the river. Her mornings were slow. She'd make tea, stretch to music, and feed the stray cats that gathered near her balcony. Most days, she taught dance at a community center named the Aurora Collective, a place founded by former dancers where art and advocacy intertwined. Inside Aurora, the walls were painted with murals of movement. The women and men in mid-step, powerful, weightless. The floorboards bore scratches from endless rehearsals, the kind that spoke of effort, not exploitation. It smelled of sweat, chalk, and liberation. Mara was older, wiser, softer in her edges, but firmer in her stance. The new generation of dancers called her Miss M out of respect, though she'd always tell them, "Don't make me sound ancient." They'd laugh, but to them, she was something between a mentor and a myth. One afternoon during a break, a young dancer named Rhea approached her. "Miss M," she said hesitantly. Can I ask you something? My university is doing a project on workplace reform. They said you started it all. Is that true? Mara smiled, setting her water bottle aside. No, I didn't start it. I was just one of the first to stop pretending nothing was wrong. The change started the moment we refused to be silent. Raya frowned thoughtfully. It's weird. We learn about it like history, like it happened a long time ago. Mara nodded slowly. That's how it always feels when people grow up safer than those before them. But don't forget, safety is borrowed from someone else's risk. Honor that by keeping it alive. That night, after class, Mara walked home along the river. The city was peaceful now. Neon lights shimmered over the water, not oppressive, not blinding, just alive. She stopped at a small street vendor where she used to eat after late shifts years ago. The same old man still ran it, though he recognized her now. You're that woman from the TV, he said with a gentle grin. The one who stood up to that big man. You changed everything. Mara chuckled softly. I didn't change everything. I just helped people see what needed to change. He handed her a bowl of noodles and said, seeing is half the battle. She ate by the river, watching reflections ripple. The city skyline glowed like a memory she could finally look at without flinching. For the first time in years, she felt peace instead of purpose. A stillness she'd forgotten how to recognize. But even peace can echo. A week later, she received an invitation to speak at a university conference, a symposium on gender, labor, and the performing arts. She almost declined. But then she saw the list of topics: ethics in entertainment, the legacy of the Dancers Union, art as resistance. She smiled and wrote back, I'll be there. The auditorium was full the day she arrived, rows of students, journalists, artists. The lights were warm, not blinding. She stood at the podium, looking at faces eager to learn. For a moment, the memory of her first stage flashed through her mind. The glare, the noise, the facade. This time, she was performing truth. When we began, she said softly, we didn't have a plan. We just had fear and the need to turn that fear into something meaningful. People think revolutions are loud. Sometimes they start with a whisper, a conversation backstage, a single act of defiance, a shared look that says, enough. What we did wasn't perfect. We lost jobs, friends, even parts of ourselves. But we gained something priceless, the ability to look at the mirror and recognize the person staring back. The room was silent, captivated. She continued, I learned that change doesn't come from anger alone. It comes from education, from teaching people what exploitation looks like, how it hides in contracts, in compliments, in silence. When we understand the mechanics of abuse, we dismantle it piece by piece. Her tone softened. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Art is not submission, it's expression. And expression should never cost you your dignity. Applause filled the room, loud and sincere. She looked out over the audience, so many young faces, fearless in ways she once wasn't, and felt something like closure. Afterward, a small group of students gathered around her, asking questions, eager for advice. One of them asked, do you ever regret it, what it cost you? Mara thought for a moment. Regret? She repeated. No. Pain? Yes. Fear? Plenty. But regret? She shook her head gently. Every story has a price. I just decided mine was worth paying. That night, she walked home under the soft glow of city lights. Rain had begun to fall, fine and steady. She let it touch her face, feeling the rhythm of it, almost like the bass line from years ago when everything had begun. She paused at a crosswalk, watching people hurry by, umbrellas open like petals in motion. A bus passed, its billboard flashing an ad for the Aurora Collective, Empowerment Through Art. For the first time in forever, she laughed, not bitterly, not sadly, but freely. She reached home, dried off, and sat by her window with a notebook. She began to write, not an exposé, not a speech, but a personal reflection. Something private, meant for herself and for the women who danced beside her. She wrote, we were once invisible, our stories scattered in smoke and spotlight, but we found each other, and in finding each other, we found power, the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't exploit, but uplifts. If anyone reads this years from now, I hope they understand. The revolution wasn't in the headlines or the protests. It was in the way we chose to believe in our worth, even when no one else did. It was in every dancer who said no, every voice that trembled but still spoke. She stopped writing, smiled, and whispered the final line aloud. We turned survival into art, and art into change. Outside, the rain softened. The city hummed with quiet life. Somewhere, music played, soft, slow, and full of possibility. Mara closed her notebook, leaned back, and exhaled deeply. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It never really was. It was about revelation, the moment when light touches truth and truth finally dances free.